Hi, everyone. Welcome to Imaginal Goo, an audio series exploring the quirks, questions, and courageous moments of life. I'm your host, Judith Martinez, and I'm so excited you're here. We are kicking off this incredible new series with an incredible, very special person, Rachel, who's our very first guest. I'm going to let Rachel share a little bit about herself in a little bit, but truly, this whole series is dedicated to the messy, sometimes metaphorically gooey, uncomfortable moments of life, especially as we think about moments of change and transition. And so this entire series is a collection of stories from women all through their walks of life, through different stages, really navigating what that means. And so Imaginal Goo is exploring how can we make the most out of the cards that life deals us, but also reimagining what life can look like when we decide to play and to be imaginative again. So with that, I'm actually going to pass it over to Rachel, because Rachel, I'd love for you to share a little bit about yourself. And I guess if there's one thing that you'd want people to take away with them from this conversation.
I've actually been thinking about this question for a while. And hi, everyone. I'm Rachel. It's so good to be here, Judith, and I'm so excited for you. I think what I'd like people to take away from this conversation is a few things, but I think the first is really to have faith in yourself and to learn through practice how to trust yourself if that's not something innate. And for most of us, it's not. So I would say that's one of the things, but I feel like I have about 100 things I think people should be taking away from this conversation. So I'm just going to start with faith, but we can keep going.
I love that. In terms of faith, which is, gosh, there's so much that we could even unpack there. What about that? And I guess if you could share a little bit more about your story, your background. I know when I first met you, goodness, I think it's like over 2 years now since when I first met you in this small little state called Massachusetts. And I happened to take one of your courses, your classes, and it was all around tapping into your intuition. And I know that when I found you, and I don't think that it was an accident that I found you when I found you, I was really grappling with a lot of different things. I was in the thick and in the middle of grad school. I was really at a point of transition, just even professionally, personally. And I'll never forget some of the backstory that you shared with me about your own trajectory and kind of what led you to where you are today. So would you mind sharing a little bit more about that and how
Sure.
faith has kind of played a role in your journey?
I don't want to start from the day I was born, but I will just for a second, which is that I think I was born like all of us with an inherent belief in myself. And as I grew, it was, siphoned and knocked out of me in different ways. And I started to put my success in the hands of others, or I used my intuition, let's say, to give other people what I thought they needed versus what I needed. And I ended up, I think probably the story you're talking about is that I ended up in a 15-year career that I didn't really like, but was quite good at, and stayed there, not trusting my intuition enough, not hearing it when every day it would knock on my door and just say, Rachel, this isn't for you. This isn't for you. And it was a good career. I was an educator. I had a lot of love for what I did. But the feelings I had about my work weren't exactly trustworthy, if that makes sense. It felt like what I was doing was meaningful. I didn't have the sense that it was for me. And it wasn't until I had, at a young enough age, a total body meltdown. And I spent about 9 months of my life struggling to walk and move. And I think I had 2 physical therapists quit on me because I wasn't getting better. I mean, it really was just this process. And I finally had a doctor say to me, this is physical, but this is also something else. And I had to find myself and find my intuition again and start to work on how to live for me and not for what I thought everyone else maybe needed from me. And that is a work in progress. That was about 6 years ago. My life has completely changed, but at the same time, it's still something I think about. Am I living for me today, or am I living for someone else?
Oh my gosh. I always get the chills when you share that because I think, for one, I resonate deeply with that. And actually, I think there's so many people that I know in my life where it took health. Like it
Yes,
took
the
something
body.
physically happening
Yep.
to the body. I know I went through that definitely in my early 20s. And it's scary. And I think it was really perspective shaping for me. And so what I love about what you shared was the grueling journey it sounded like it took, but also there was a moment of pause and recognition that it was beyond just the physical. And that's been something that I've been looking into more and more over the course of my life, and just looking back on decisions I made or decisions I didn't make, or things I was maybe too afraid to do or say. And I guess I'm curious, with as you are where you are now, 6 years later, you talk about the importance of faith. How did you get to that point? And I realize this is only like a 50-minute show.
I'm going to say it was really hard. It was really hard. There were a lot of sudden realizations, and then there were a lot of really slow, very painful months and even years of second guessing myself and not understanding kind of what I was supposed to do next. I think about that time like a gray fog, and I just couldn't see out of it, but I kept taking steps forward. It felt very lonely. I also had an incredible support system. And I think one of the things I would want people to take away from this as well is that at some point in those, in the year later after I did have to have surgery. So it wasn't just that I kind of like thought my way out of it. I was, it was intervened in a medical way, but I gathered a team around me. I created a team of experts, and I still have them. And some of them have changed and some of them have shifted, but I got my team. I put my team together, and I knew I was doing it. I did it intentionally. I got someone to help me with my body. I had a number of people to help me with my body. I had people helping me with my heart. I made sure my mind was stimulated, and then I had, that I was taking courses that helped me to feel like I was learning. And most importantly, I discovered my spirituality and the way that I interacted with my spirituality. I guess I had always had it, but I was interacting with it in a deeper, more faithful way. But it really wasn't easy. I mean, for 2 of those years, I was living in a basement teaching yoga classes for $12 an hour. I mean, it was hard. And we had a pandemic, and that was hard too. And so there were a lot of things that felt very timely and interesting. I look back on the medical experience as being one of the most incredible things to have ever happened to me. Had I not been in so much pain, I would never have shifted. And I am so grateful for it. And I know that can sound trite, but I really mean it. I am so grateful that happened to me, with me. It happened with me.
Oh my God. Even like that shift of like to me, with me is so powerful. As you share about creating this team, I'm like, I love that. I don't think I've really, like, I've heard, like bumper stickers or Instagram posts or like the Pinterest pin boards where it's all these different quotes. And, what you said reminded me of, there's this quote that I remember reading at some point growing up in my 20s of like, be the CEO of your own life kind of mentality, or like being able to run your life like you're the CEO doesn't require you to have a business necessarily. I don't think that's what you're saying, but I think there's something to you have agency over your life, and who are the people that maybe are your quote unquote board of directors maybe that support you. And I'll never forget in your class, which I always rave over, I remember you shared like, who are the people that help you be you? And I remember when you asked me that 2 years ago, I had no answer. I didn't really know what that was for me at that particular point in time. So for you, as you built this team around you, how did you know, what were the things that you looked for? What were some green flags where you were like, this person's aligned, or this is someone that is going to help me into this next phase of myself?
That's a great question. I'm going to kind of answer it with a story, if that's okay.
I love story. Yeah.
One of my first team members, or I call them like my team of experts. That part of what I do for my work is I speak to kind of people's spirits and they're, on the other side. And so that's a whole other thing. So I'm not talking about our spiritual team. I'm talking about my physical on this earth. These are the people I pay to help me team.
Yes.
And I had one, and this was when I was still living across the state, and I was in a lot of pain, and I would go to her for acupuncture and all sorts of other things. She just kind of intuitively knew what to do. And I remember thinking I wanted to be just like her. And that's when I would say green flag. I think it's okay to have someone where you say, I want to live your life. And how can I figure out how to do that in my way, right? I was probably crying on her table or something like that. And I said, I don't know who I am and I don't know what to do next. And she said, well, what do you want to be? And I said, well, I want to be a writer. She said, okay, so if you want to write, go ahead and write your story. And I said, what story? She said, your entire life. Write your entire life down. But I want you to start with the sentence, when I was little, I wanted to be, and then finish it and then go from there. And I said, okay, I got this. And so I wrote, when I was little, I wanted to be a writer, which is a lie. I didn't want to be a writer when I was little, but I wanted to be a writer 6 years ago. So I felt like I had to say it. So I thought, okay, wait, this isn't real. What did I really want to be when I was little? And the word was magic. When I was little, I wanted to be magic. Everything I've done since then, I forged a trail for that value, magic. So to answer your question, the people that I work with, if I think they're a little bit magic, I'm with them. If I feel magic when I'm around them, I'm with them. If I'm doing something that doesn't feel like magic, I have to stop and really think, is this for me or is this person for me? And that was so helpful. And I did end up writing like 80,000 words about, when I was little, I wanted to be magic. And I offer that too. I think her name was Wendy. I think Wendy gave amazing advice and it's a good way to start.
Thank you, Wendy, for for helping to shape you, and you have definitely helped shape me over the course of my being able to know you and our exchanges. I love that. That's so beautiful. As you shared that story, it made me think, gosh, how many times do we move through life and it kind of chips away at the magic? Like for me, when I heard you say that, I'm like, gosh, my answer would have been being a lawyer. But then it's like, I don't know if I even could say lawyer at the age of 5, right? Or like, what is a lawyer? And I don't have that answer that you were able to kind of get to the empirical, I guess, like concept of it for yourself, like magic. And that's going to be my homework when this interview ends, because I'm going to think about that.
Can't wait to
hear.
But
I know. I'm just thinking of, gosh, like so many things from what you shared. I feel it so deeply for myself. And there's even like a sadness when I hear that, like for me thinking about, and again, knowing a lot of other people who maybe feel the same, where how many times did we take the practical route? And how many times do we take the route that is more traveled because it's safer, or also, quite frankly, sometimes there's no privilege to be able to dream. Like, I don't think my immigrant parents had maybe the privilege to think about that. But then again, when I hear about magic, it's like, maybe they did at a young age, right? Like want to be that. I share all of that because I guess a follow-up to that beautiful story is, how have you woven in magic, and how has it arrived at a point where this is my life, this is my self-expression?
How strange do you want me to get, Judith?
You know what? This is a safe space. What I love, again, this whole series is the quirks, the questions, and the courageous moments of life. And I want it to be a gamut of like real stories from real women and how they're navigating the unexpected moments of life. So you can get as weird as you want. There is no such thing as too weird. I welcome it. So
when I was little, magic to me, when I was cognizantly little, right? Like before I was 5, I don't really know. But when I was cognizantly little, magic to me meant I believed in fairies. I believed that the forest behind my house talked to me. I believed that the books I read were real. I believed that I lived in a world where the unseen was right next to me. I guess I just decided to believe that again in a kind of very real, practiced way. And so I started weaving in magic in ways that were kind of like practical. I took classes, not on magic specifically, but on intuition, which is a very magical thing that we can do. We all have this ability to have deep intuition, and it's kind of sparkly when it happens. So I took classes, I read books, I walked a lot in nature. I started to connect with the forest in the way that I used to when I was little. And I picked up a deck of tarot cards. I had never read tarot before in my life until about 6 years ago. And I picked up a deck and it was as if I had been playing with tarot cards for 20 years. I knew what to do almost immediately. And I still learn from them, but it was like something that I'd always known. So I started infusing tarot into my everyday. I just started to live again in a world where the unseen was spectacularly present.
That's beautiful. I'm oh my gosh, there's so many follow-up questions I want to ask you. Okay, let me focus in. Let me lock in real quick. Okay, I'm gonna go one route and then I kind of want to circle back to like tarot, and I want to tether that thread a bit. But so you talk about intuition, how it's something that we can all really tap into, and it's like this form of magic. I mean, whoever's listening to this, like, they can interpret it however which way they want, whether it's the woo, whether it's the woo woo, whether it's a gut feeling, whether it's, there's so many different words that maybe some people can think about. And another thing that I will never forget from one of your classes is also how limiting the English language can be. For
Especially about this.
Especially about this. And,
Yeah.
you know, when I think about my ancestors who are, you know, indigenous people from the Philippines, where, you know, Eastern medicine and certain practices weren't, you know, they were considered very connected to the earth and connected to the sun and the ocean. And it was so distinct than maybe the life that I live now compared to my ancestors, for example. I share all of that because I'd love to, one, hear, how do you define intuition? And then two, for those who maybe are listening to this interview, whether it's intentionally, by happenstance, who's maybe trying to tap into that, whatever that is for them, where can they start?
Great questions. There are about 7 different definitions that I use when I talk about intuition. But I think the first is I talk about intuition first by what it isn't. We talk about intuition as a feeling because I think the phrase gut feeling is something that's just kind of been passed down. But I tend to think of feelings as emotions. And emotions, if you don't hold on to an emotion, it goes away in about 90 seconds. And then if you hold on to an emotion, as you know, it can get stronger or weaker or change. Intuition doesn't go away and it doesn't change. Intuition is very present. So I've moved away from thinking about intuition as a feeling, and I talk about it as a sense. For people interested, if you just Google what the clairs are, which the word clair means clear, and if you take a look at all the different ways that we can sense information being given to us, that's intuition. Intuition is also something that can be accessed deliberately, and it is something that happens to us. So intuition we accept, but also we can ask for. The acceptance of intuition is that kind of lightning strike of you just have an intuitive sense of something and you act on it or don't. And then later you might regret it.
Yep.
And then the deliberate kind of asking of intuition, and that's something that I go through in a lot of my classes, is this idea that we can ask ourselves empowering questions to receive empowering answers. At this point, for me, this is a practice I do automatically. I don't even think about it anymore, but there are specific reframes that I teach people about how to ask yourself a question to empower your intuition to speak versus your endless hamster wheel thoughts or your kind of emotional state of being at that time. One of the most empowering questions that I give people is, what do I need to know? What do I need to know today? What do I need to know about blank? What do I need to know about this person? What do I need to know about my heart? What do I need to know about my day? And that kind of a sentence opens you up to information that you wouldn't necessarily be opened up to if you asked the question in a different way. Like, why does this always happen to me? Or when will I get what I need? Those questions disempower us, and our intuition isn't as excited to speak. And the other way that I remind people to use intuition is to pay attention to the synchronicities that you experience in life and to record them, write them down, and get excited about them. Whatever those synchronicities are, that is part of this web of interconnectedness that we experience when we live with intuition.
All I'm going to say is thank the universe this is recorded, because I'm going to go back to that and keep re-listening to it as I work on my own intuition. And again, having taken one of your classes serendipitously, I thought I was looking for a mentor, and what I realized is I was looking for rebuilding trust in myself.
You're your own mentor.
You're your own mentor.
Yes.
And it's so beautiful. So I'm gonna I need everyone to know Rachel helped me get to this point of realizing, and will I ever always want to mentor? Of course, like building that team. But there, again, when we crossed paths 2 years ago, I was really at this interesting inflection point in my life. And I've been coming across more and more people who are facing their own inflection points, their constant points of transition, the moment in the cocoon, maybe metaphorically speaking, where they're uncomfortable and they don't really know what's on the other side. And then unbeknownst to them, they're actually in the process of becoming a butterfly. Pulling back to something you also said earlier around the role that it's played in your life, how you've woven in, I guess, practical magic. And even what you just shared now around you are your own mentor. I'm so curious, what is the worst piece of advice that you've ever gotten, whether it's from a mentor or not?
Go to college.
Oh, that's so good.
I will just say this. I'm kind of joking when I say that, but I think what I mean by that is, well, first of all, I don't believe that advice is bad until you take it. So you can get all the advice in the world, good or bad, but it's only bad if you don't listen to yourself and you take it and it's clearly not right for you, which you already knew to begin with. That being said, I think about some of the regrets that I have in life. I'm not one of these people who says I have no regrets. I have a lot of them. And I think of those regrets and I think about how I felt pushed to move in certain directions at certain times when I wasn't ready. That's most of it, really. So I would say that if we're going with the question, what's the worst advice? The worst advice is to do the thing you're supposed to do at the time that you're supposed to do it, that someone else tells you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so when I joke about going to college, I wasn't ready and I went and I didn't need to, probably shouldn't have. So it's the shoulds. It's the, oh, you should do this and you should do it at this time. Bad advice.
Oh man, as you're saying that, I'm thinking about the Rolodex of shoulds that I've acquired over the course of my years. I love that. I love that that's also coming from someone who's held a formal role and capacity of being a teacher. Because I think sometimes we conflate, like, I think for me, right, sometimes it's like people like your immediate family or your chosen family or teachers or instructors sometimes, and I'll speak for myself, sometimes I can have this automatic sense of like, oh, well, you're an example. Because you are in this role, you are automatically an example. And hearing you say that, it kind of it's a reminder for me to reverse engineer and to question, I don't know, do I believe that? Is that true for me? And that's, quite frankly, that's part of what this kind of series was birthed out of. I mean, you very much inspired this podcast actually coming to life. For those who are listening, I took another class of Rachel's, and unbeknownst to me, a question in the back of my mind was, do I create this thing that I've been thinking about? And it ended up being what is now Imaginal Goo. And hearing you share about, not necessarily subscribing to the shoulds is liberating. And I think can give people permission, I would hope, to trust themselves and learn to trust themselves, I would say. Because I think in my own personal journey, what prompted my search for, okay, what's the word for it? I guess it's like intuition, it's trust, it's gut feelings. It was coming out of a really painful relationship. It was coming out of a relationship that I, quote unquote, probably shouldn't have been in. It reminded me of a lot of moments where, where do we sometimes, I'll say this word, sometimes it can be a little intense, but where do we betray ourselves in pursuing something that maybe we know deep down we probably shouldn't be?
I don't think that's intense at all. I see it all the time. I work with a lot of people and I see it all the time. And I think I betray myself in little ways every day. And I have to remind myself of who I am right after I betray myself.
Right.
But it does happen. I mean, this is life. And if we're aware and present, we are able to say, oh, hold on a second. I just did that thing where I did something I didn't want to do and I did it anyway. Or I did something I thought I should, but it's not good for me, actually. And that can happen in really big ways, obviously, life-changing ways. And then also it can happen in really small ways.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Totally. But I will say, though, on the other side, not that I'm by no means am I done, or like, we've arrived. Like we're all done. There's no more growth to go. I think over the course of these years, I've realized it's like the muscle, right? Like when you're going to the gym or you're building that muscle of learning to trust yourself, I've come to realize the look and feel and smell of what tapping into my intuition is.
Mm.
Like, because I've learned to trust myself again, where it's like, okay, I said I was going to go work out. I'm not going to betray myself by not going. I'm going to go.
Yeah.
And so the more I could count on my own word and maybe the integrity of my word, I've noticed a correlation to being able to trust myself and my intuition of like,
100%.
like this feels weird, or like this feels good.
Yep.
I love that. I love that you bring that up.
I love that for you.
Thank you. One other thing in terms of the worst advice, I guess a follow-up from that is, as you look back in the magic that you've created, also coming to a point of the life that you've built for yourself now, the shoulds, the should nots, all of it. What is something that younger Rachel, who wanted to be magic, what would she not believe about your life right now if like you were having a conversation with her today?
A lot of the life I'm living is a life I imagined for myself when I was young. It's not completely. Obviously, there are things that I don't think she would have ever imagined, but there's a lot of it that feels very true to what she desired when she was little. Where I live is one of those things. My proximity to the woods. Woods are very important to me. I'm a Pisces. I need a lot of earth around me, or else I just go everywhere.
As a Capricorn, I selfishly approve that message.
Yes. Exactly. And I get to use my imagination every day in a way that is that I think maybe a lot of adults don't get to. And she would have known that. She's on board. But I think the general contentedness that I have, I'm not always content. I don't want you to think I'm just over here being like completely present and content at every moment. But the general contentedness that I have about my life and where I know it's going and where I am is younger Rachel, especially, like teenage Rachel, would have had absolutely no idea. She wanted it, but she wouldn't have. I don't know that she knew it could happen.
What a joy to hear that.
Yeah.
That it is your reality. And to your point, it's not perfect or it's not everything, but it's pretty darn good.
It did not come easy. And so I do just want to say too, like this reality that I've created with my husband, I want to give him a lot of credit. It was not easy at all. And I spent more of my life out of sync than in sync at this point, or in alignment. But now I am kind of like tipping the scales heavily in alignment. So it's balances out.
That's beautiful. Congratulations. Like, feel called to say that. I think that's beautiful. I want to dive a little bit into this concept of what the heck does imaginal selves mean?
Yeah.
Because as I've been in the process, and again, for me, this audio series it's a form of self-expression. It's like a sense of play for me, but also as a philosophy major, having grown up, I've always been intrigued by how things work and these large, kind of enigmatic questions that don't really have an answer all the time. I remember being introduced to imaginal selves when I was in one of your classes. So I'd love for you to share a little bit about that, because I think so much of what you've shared already, everything, I think, even as you reflect on younger Rachel, thinking about this version of Rachel in your life, has been kind of a product of you being imaginative.
Very much.
And so I'd love for you to share for our listeners what are imaginal selves, what prompted you to even be called into bringing that into your teaching, even, I would say, through your different workshops and courses. I'd be curious. Could you share more about it?
Absolutely. And I want to give kind of credit to two people. So first of all, imaginal selves, not something I invented. This is a scientific term for this idea that the caterpillar, when it goes into the cocoon, basically disintegrates into nothing, really, this goo. and then it builds itself back up and eventually comes out as a butterfly. And this disintegration process is certainly something that happened to me, again, 5 and 6 years ago, but continues to happen all the time, I think, in little ways. The two people I want to give some credit to are Asia Suler, who I might butcher the title of the book, but wrote the book Mirrors in the Earth, and Thomas More, who's a soul psychologist. And in her book, Asia wrote about this idea of imaginal cells. And in Thomas More's book, Care of the Soul, he had a sentence in there that I've never forgotten, which is the sentence of imagination before being. This idea that before anything has come into being, it had to have been imagined. Literally anything that surrounds us, material or creative, had to be imagined first. And as someone with a high intensity imagination, my imagination is wild. I really appreciated both of their takes on that. And so I kind of borrowed their ideas and used it for my course, but also just in general. I believe that imagination is one of the best vehicles for intuition. There are a couple of vehicles for intuition. Interconnectedness is another. But imagination is this thing that the more your imagination has free reign and play, the more your intuition is able to express itself. Because you're able to picture or sense or hear what you need to know moving forward. And that can only happen if your imagination is working on overtime. That makes sense?
It really does. It makes total sense. It's such a great reference point because I think, there's so many, the fact that this literally happened out in nature. And I can't help but think about, we turn to nature when we think about the seasons or when it's time to reap, when it's time to sow, the seasons, like all of those things that play an impact on our daily lives, whether we realize it or not. But I also love how it's the things that can often be deemed as impractical that can actually lead to some of the most fulfilling and practical, tangible things in our lives. And as someone who, unbeknownst to me, imagined having the life that I have now, I don't think if I had just taken the path of, what have I maybe been told to do or not to do or the shoulds, I don't think I'd have this life that I love currently. To your point, is it perfect? No. But is it mine? Yeah, it is. For those who are on their journey of beginning to imagine again, maybe giving themselves permission to imagine again, what are some practices or maybe things that you think can help nourish that? Or maybe even things that deter it as well?
To nourish the imagination, I think you have to find a way to play. And this can be in your own way. When I was teaching, I always made sure my colleagues and my students knew that I was not a fun teacher. I didn't like fun. I didn't like forced fun. I was not that, didn't love field day. Like I didn't like fun. So play to me is going to look very different than play to someone else, right? For me, play is like sitting under a tree for an hour. That's play. So the idea then is to find what you play at and what feels completely playful and not based in any success model. Basically, don't try to do things to get better at them, to hone a skill. Just play. That's one way to jumpstart the imagination. Remember what you loved to do when you were little. When I was little, I liked to twirl around my living room. I'm not necessarily doing that now, but I am making sure that my body does something fun every day or every few days. So I think part of it is play. Part of it is awe and delight. I am one of those people that will wander through the woods and stop every 2 seconds if I need to and be in awe at a mushroom growing or a little squirrel doing its thing. It's very annoying to hike with me because I'm constantly pointing things out. But awe is I think another way to make sure your imagination and your interconnectedness stays with you. And notice things and be amazed. There are ways you can do this. There's a Substack called The Art of Noticing, which is pretty good about this very topic. But there are ways to just wander through your regular life, just in your home, and notice and be in awe and delight of of what's around you and how you are. I also look at myself in the mirror all the time and say things like, I love you, Rachel, you're amazing. And I mean it. So that's always fun too.
I love that. I'm going to have to start taking that up too. I resonate with a lot of what you've shared around, what play has meant for me or what it's looked like. I love that though. I have a mirror, so I can definitely.
Great.
I have a mirror. I can definitely say a few
You can do that.
loving and encouraging things to myself. That's great. I have 2 more questions, and then I want us to move into our rapid fire round where I will ask 5 questions before we wrap. But one of the last questions I have is, life can be hard.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Life can be hard, stating the obvious here. And I think the world that we live in today continuously can be one of deep pain, deep transition, deep uncertainty. As people learn to navigate through the challenges that inevitably come with life, what are some things that you've either shared in your practices or even through some of your workshops or teachings around ways to cope? Like, because I think sometimes, at least, again, I'll speak for myself, sometimes it could be really hard to hold on to wanting to be imaginative or playful or to dare to dream again when I'm just trying to have a good day.
I don't think dreaming or imagination is, I think it's the most important act of resistance we have. So even if you're just trying to get through the day, if there's a possibility to pause and dream and fantasize and imagine, do it. You can even set a timer. If you're feeling like today's just not a day where you're going to be able to sit with yourself, set a timer for 6 minutes and imagine. If you're a writer, get your journal and write down what you see, what you hope. That, I just want to say off the bat, I think another important thing to practice is stillness. And I've talked about this. I talk about this a lot in my classes. Stillness on the regular, and also stillness before asking yourself an important question. So if you could do 6 minutes of stillness a day, that's wonderful. If you can do more, that's even better. And then there's if you're trying to figure something out, or if you have a problem that needs fixing, or if you are wondering if this is the right person to be in relationship with, pause, give yourself at least 5 long breaths, and then ask the empowering question of, what do I need to know? I can only be good at my intuitive work for others if I'm still. I sit on the floor. I'm sitting on the floor right now. It's a chance for me to stay still. If I'm sitting on a chair, I'll move around too much, right? So any way you can find yourself in stillness, I think that that's important. But I also say that you can also go for a run and have that be your still part of the day, as long as you're not listening to anything. Because your brain needs time to turn off.
Thank you. That's what I needed to hear. My last question before our rapid round is, I've decided that I am one of the luckiest humans on this planet because of the people that I have been fortunate enough to be surrounded by and the people that I have had the privilege of learning from. And you are very much one of those people. I'm so convinced that it's not an accident that I met you when I met you, that you were where you were, that I was where I was, that I continuously still learn from you. And one of the things that I've always admired about you as Rachel, but even just what you represent for me, is the power of being radically authentic and courageous. And we said this a couple of times during this interview, but just, I think you're practical magic personified. And I think that that's something, growing up, one of the things that I found myself saying, which led me to making certain decisions, like creating a nonprofit, for example, was, I can't be what I can't see. Like, I can imagine all that I want, but until I also see a sliver of hope or an example of someone who's doing it, it's kind of hard to create from nothing. It's not easy for everyone. So I share that as a heartfelt gratitude for you and to thank you for this conversation, and also with a question for whoever stumbles across this episode, what would you want them to be left with as we've talked about all of these things, like from the importance of faith and imagining to looking into clarity, trusting yourself as people move throughout these seasons of their lives? What's something that they can take home with them starting today?
I will tell you this. Like I said, I see a lot of people, hundreds of people a year. And many of them come to me for intuitive soul readings. And they often ask me, what's my purpose? Rachel, can you tell me my purpose? And because I have a kind of access to, I don't know, a download of amazing information, I'm able to do that with everyone, but everyone's purpose is exactly the same. And sometimes this disappoints them, but everyone has the same purpose in life. And this is in answer to your question. Your soul's purpose is to bloom. It's to bloom. So in every season or in every year or in every act, are you blooming? Are you growing and becoming? That's it. I think often people want me to tell them they're on the right path or they're in the right job or they're in the right relationship. And that's all kind of secondary, because my question is to them, do you feel like you're blooming? And what do you need to do to ensure that you bloom? Do you need more water? Do you need more sun? Do you need a little fence around your flower? What do you need to bloom? So I would just ask, what do I need to bloom today?
Oh, lovely. Thank you for that. I'm going to go into our rapid fire questions.
I'm terrified.
I think you're going to do great. I think, again, safe space, brave space, no wrong answers here. We're just having a conversation. So there's 5. I'm going to share it, and then I'm going to say blank, and you're going to fill in the blank top of mind. What comes to you? I am so proud of myself for blank.
Oh gosh, everything. Can't think of just one.
It's perfect. I forgive myself for blank.
Being human.
Dear younger self, blank.
You'll get there.
Dear future self, blank.
You'll get there.
And lastly, what is one thing you know to be capital T true?
I think it would be to bloom.
This was so wonderful, Rachel. I learned so much. Every conversation we have, I feel like I grow heaps and bounds every time I walk away from it. And I know that our listeners will feel the same when they get to hear this. I want to give you the last word. If there's anything else that you might want to say, we'll be sharing in our show notes ways for folks to be able to keep in touch with you, to follow along. We'll be having recaps and reflection questions on our Substack for folks who want to continue the conversation. If you want to connect with other folks to help build your intuition, for example, this is a community for you. But Rachel, anything else that you'd want to say?
I just want to say that I'm so proud of you. And this is amazing. And just keep doing this. Keep going. That's it. Thank you.
Rachel.
Thanks for having me.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much. I'm so excited for what's ahead. For everyone who tuned in, thank you so much for listening. Again, we're so excited to create practical magic with everyone on this journey through Imaginal Goo. Thank you, Rachel. Take care.
Thank you.